chat, that would be awesome. And it's 1:15, so let's go ahead and part 2 of speaker training for underrepresented Drupalists. And yesterday we went over making a selecting your topic, and we did some exercises for that. So hopefully you have come into today with a topic. And if you weren't here yesterday and you didn't get the homework or the slides, just try to think of a topic in the back of your head while you're listening to the rest of this. Build on that while writing our pitch, so you'll need to have some kind of topic. So, writing a pitch. Yesterday. Yes. Let me see if I can find it. Actually, Fran, would you mind sharing that link? Because I don't have it on me right this second. In the chat, I would super appreciate that. Okay, so the pitch. Whatever your motivations for speaking are, you have to get selected. And for that, we have to create the proposal or pitch or abstract, we'll use these terms interchangeably, that gets your talk selected. And since your proposal defines the scope of your talk, it's a good step to do in the overall process of developing your talk. So, a good pitch. This is an example of a good pitch. Responsify all the things. In our new web multiverse, it's more important than ever to make your valuable content available to all users, regardless of how they access your site. In this talk, we'll cover how responsive web design came about, the latest responsive web design news and trends, and some basic and not so basic techniques you can use to a responsive one. This is intended for designers who aren't afraid to get their hands dirty with a little code. So, what's good about this? It's a good length. It tells you what the talk will cover and who it's aimed at. And in some cases, you also would want to say what people will walk away from with this talk. It has a slightly cute title, but it's not too clever. It stands on its own. So you don't want to give it a title that doesn't tell you anything, like CSS and elephants. You want to give it something that catches attention, but gives you an idea of what's actually the talk. And for your pitch, you want to tailor the tone of your writing and vocabulary to the specific audience and event that you're applying to. Really important. So meetups tend to be pretty casual. Larger events tend to be pretty business. So, keep an eye on your vocabulary, what kind of hooks or points of interest you want to focus on depending on the event. Like if you're at a security event and you're talking about Drupal, you probably don't want to talk about Drupal theming. You want to talk about security in Drupal. Drupal, the community itself, is a little more fun. You can be a little more playful, but you still want to keep it professional. No politics, nothing religious, no sexual undertones or anything like that. I think we had a talk submitted last year or this year that was like, make something great again. And we were like, nope, that's not appropriate. So, be aware of your audience. And this is a list of 6 important points in making your pitch. And this is when I share these slides, you'll have the link to the source where we got these. The proposal to the attendees, not to the curators. So many conferences are going to use your talk proposal as the description of the talk in their program. So with that in mind, your target reader is the conference attendee, the program team. Reader why your talk will interest them and what they will learn. The program team wants to put together a great conference with compelling talks for the attendees. Your talk will be part of the package that they offer. So sell it. Make sure you research the event. Are there different tracks? Who is the audience? Is this for developers, for users, business people? Is it design heavy? This has different personalities. Are they short on technical presentations? Are they light on talks for beginners? Try to fill a need that they have. Specific about the focus that your talk will have. Generally speaking, a shallow introduction to many things is not as interesting as an in-depth introduction to one thing. If you discuss the broader topic, do so only to set the focus on. This is a major reason that I decline a lot of talks as a track chair for DrupalCon. There are so many proposals that we get that they just mention so many things. Like, you have 45 minutes. There is no way that you can talk about all of these things, or this proposal has no focus. They're just, they've listed all of these different things that they want to talk about, and I don't know what the focus of this talk is. Major downfall of a lot of proposals. Pose the question that your talk will answer. This is a great strategy for talks. Talks often answer questions that start with how, why, when, what, and so on. An easy trick is to directly ask these questions in your proposal, leaving the reader wondering the answer. Also, even use a question as the title of your talk. And make your point as succinctly as you can. If your first draft requires more than 2 paragraphs to get the point of your topic, edit to narrow things down. Take out any words that can be removed without changing the meaning. You may have a lot of competition, so try to make a good impression. If your proposal is too much work to read or understand, it might get skipped during the selection process. I cannot emphasize this enough. Use proper grammar, spelling, and punctuation. If you submit a sloppily written proposal, you will appear careless and as if you are not taking the opportunity seriously. You risk being rejected on those grounds outright. Speaking requires a lot of thoughtful preparation, and curators can only assume that you will be as careless when preparing the talk itself. Everybody makes typos, but that's what having someone else read your proposal is for. And also, I know that one issue that we face in a global community like Drupal is people who don't speak English as a first language. But once you've been, reading session proposals for a little while, it's very, very obvious whose session proposals are, which session proposals are for folks who don't speak English as a first language and who is writing very sloppily. Very, very obvious. And I would never ding someone or reject their proposal solely because, they don't speak English as a first language. But if it's very clear that they're in English, did not edit their proposal, that's absolutely a reason to decline a talk. And a follow-up to that is have your proposal reviewed by someone with experience. Just as you might ask a friend to critique an essay or the talk itself, ask someone, ideally a writer, speaker, or curator, to review your talk proposal. They will catch typos as well as verify whether your proposal explains the scope of your talk and explains its benefit to the audience. So we will share some resources at the end of the presentation tomorrow in Slack, where we have a couple of Slack channels for doing just this example. Getting help with your proposals, getting help with your talks, getting people to read them. So the first part of writing your talk, or the first part of your talk that people will read, is the title. So you have to come up with a great one. You want to try to think of something catchy, maybe playful, but still explanatory. Please beware of too clever titles that is just explanatory and boring and not funny than something that tries to be too clever. Create a title of its own without a blurb. For example, the title of this talk is not interesting or funny, but it's very clear what this talk is for. You want something that people will understand when they scan the conference talk titles. Even in small local events, many people read the title and choose whether or not they're going to attend based on that alone. This is often especially true at in-conference events when we have a tiny little program that we're reading from that only has the titles listed and not the abstracts. Next up, creating your talk. So when we create our talk, outline, just like you would with an essay, an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. So when we did our topic, we did a who, what, why, how, and when and where questions about your topic. So with these in mind, we're going to create an outline for our talk. We'll start it just like an essay. Let's start with the introduction. So what makes a great introduction? Is about. Your introduction can often be almost a repetition of your abstract. Tell people what you're going to cover. Why does this matter? Why are you talking about this? Pique some interest. What is your hook? Open with some impact. Who is it aimed at? But also be succinct. Use an economy of words. If people feel like you're just rambling at the beginning of your talk, you're going to lose their interest. Tips for your introduction. Do not insult yourself. Apologizing in your opening calls attention to any flaws you may be concerned about and reduces the positive engagement of your audience. I can't stand when speakers start by apologizing, saying that they just wrote this talk, they're not good speakers. It sort of sets you up for failure. Don't spend 10 minutes talking about your resume. A lot of new speakers begin by talking about their family, their work history, their accomplishments, but audiences aren't really invested in you yet. However, they've already decided to come to your talk, so you don't have to convince them why they should stay. They're already here. Just talk to them. Start with talk about why you're giving this talk today. For example, tell a story about a problem that you've encountered and lead into a talk about how to solve similar problems. Summarize what you'll cover or what attendees will walk away with. This gives a high-level context of where each part of your talk falls in the larger topic. Friend to introduce you. If you're uncomfortable introducing yourself or if that feels awkward to you, you could ask someone else in the community to come up and introduce you. And that could also assign credibility to you. If you're a first-time speaker and you feel nervous, you could ask someone with a little more clout in the community to come up and introduce you. And then in the body, we want to have some main topics or story headings. What is the main point you want to get across? What are some examples or supporting points that illustrate that main point? What would be a logical flow? Again, think of this like an essay. Another tip, and people do this for essays as well, is to think in threes. So if you could break your talk down into 3 main subheadings and refer to the 5 who, what, where, when, why, and hows that we use to refine your topic. And then in the conclusion, you want to summarize what has been discussed, review the main takeaway points, the so what question, why does our topic matter, give further resources that may, and make sure to give the audience your contact information. Your Twitter or Slack handle is good. And then once you're all done, you might want to think about refining your title to make your talk more specific. As a reminder, we want it to be catchy, maybe playful, but explanatory, not too clever, and something that can stand alone. So, just like yesterday, we are going to work on these while we are here. Then we can hop over to the Drupal Diversity and Inclusion booth to use that space to have just an informal working hour where we can work on all of this together. And if you don't get it done here, And if you don't want to go over there, if you don't get it done there, I'll work on it at home. But I would love to have everybody work on it now and share, and then come over to the booth and work and share some more so that we can work on everything. So we're going to start with our pitch. Did we? Okay. We'll just use, we'll use this slide. So I want you to think about your pitch. It might be helpful if you open up the DrupalCon website and look at some of the pitches there. I do this sometimes myself when I feel unsure about the length of my pitches, and I'm like, is this one too short? Is this one too long? Let me look at some other ones. And whenever I am submitting to a new event, I always go read a bunch of the pitches and proposals from that event in the past, or if the event lets you see what's already been proposed for the current event. I mentioned yesterday in finding a topic that you want to read some past sessions to make sure that you're not proposing exactly the same talk that other people have proposed in the past, but reading those is also a good idea to get a feel for how a pitch should flow, and how those pitches are written for that event. And it might seem really hard, it might seem like an awkward thing to write, but you do sort of get sort of how an abstract, a pitch, a proposal is written. So I would love for everybody to take, let's say, 10 minutes and start writing their pitch. If you have any questions, please write them in the chat. Share in the chat. If you have a question that's easier to ask out loud, just request to speak, and that's totally fine. I am here to help and to talk us through this and to work through this. So we're about halfway through that 10 minutes. I don't expect everybody, of course, to have a totally finished proposal in 10 minutes, but I would love to know how it's going for people, what your thoughts are, if you're having trouble. Okay, question. Any suggestions on what level of technical vocab to include if it's a dev talk? Not sure where to draw the line. So this can totally depend. And I generally go by what audience you're aiming at. So if you are thinking that this is a beginner talk, try to think of using beginner vocabulary. If it's an intermediate talk, if it's an advanced talk, advanced vocabulary. So, if you're writing a talk that you come to and you're specifying that this is for an advanced audience, and you're going to write, hey, prerequisites are that you have an advanced knowledge of the Drupal caching system, then go ahead and use, vocabulary that you would expect those people to understand. If it's beginning, then, keep it light, and you say there's no prerequisites, then try not to use any vocab that people wouldn't know as a beginner. Again, that can be tricky because you don't know what anybody's level is and you can't really assume, but try to aim it at whatever you've set sort of your prerequisites or your expected audience at. Does that help? Awesome. Okay, just another minute and then we're going to move on. It's totally fine if you haven't finished. Okay, let's move on to coming up with your title. Let's take 5 minutes for this and think up a good title for your talk. I would love for you to share these. You can also share your abstracts in the chat if you want to. I know they might be a little long, so it might be a little easier to share them out loud later in the working session. But feel free to try in the chat if you'd like to. But let's work on our titles. Think, again, something that can stand alone, something that isn't too clever, but if you can, something catchy and most importantly, explanatory. And if you're struggling, always just start with a working title. Start with a working title. Great movies do it all the time. And write the rest of it and see if something comes to you. Any thoughts on having the main subject of the talk at the beginning of the title for cases where the full title may be? Like if you have something like, sorry, I'm trying to totally make sure I understand the question. Like if you have a longer title and like putting something like Drupal caching, all the things you ever wanted to learn about caching but were too afraid to ask. That would be totally fine, by the way, but let me know if I didn't understand that properly. Yeah, totally fine. That's a really common way to write up a title. And also be aware that some conferences are going to make your titles pretty short. For Minneapolis, we had a pretty short title restriction, and I think that was due to how we were going to print the programs. It was a little shorter than usual, and I actually had a lot of trouble trying to cut my title down. So you also need to make sure one reason to not make them too catchy is that you can fall in love with your catchy title and it winds up being too long. So I proposed to talk about increasing diversity in hiring, and I was on the how people are always asking for rock stars and ninja and gurus. And so the title that I had originally come up with was like a ninja, a guru, and a rock star walk into a bar, or why you need to fix your hiring process. And that was way too long. It was like twice as long as it was supposed to be. And I was so in love with that title. And I had to just make it like a not very catchy title, just something about why you need to fix your diversity, and it wasn't catchy at all. See, it was a great title. I'm going to use it somewhere. Don't steal that. That was copyright me. Okay, so we've had about 5 minutes. Does anyone want to share the time? Okay, no takers so far. Okay, so we have just over 10 minutes left, and I am going to give you the option. Do you want to start working on your outline, or do you want to ask questions? All invited over to the booth to continue this discussion. And obviously, you can work on your outline and ask questions at the same time. But I can officially open it up to Q&A if you would like. Okay, we got some votes for Q&A. So if you've got any questions, feel free to ask them. Otherwise, start working on your, go ahead and start working on your outline. While submitting sessions, is there any simple way to tell the talk will be too long? Like I mentioned earlier, the way that I can usually tell is that people are talking about way. A focused talk is going to be much easier to control, much easier to write a talk that will fall within whatever the allotted time is. If someone's proposal is sort of all over the place, if it's scattered, it's not focused, or if it's just talking about too broad of a subject or too many different subjects, I get too concerned that it isn't going to fit in the timeline. Now that going to reject it outright. Sometimes I might reach out to the speaker and say, hey, I think you have some good ideas here, but I'm worried about your focus. So do you think you could, focus this abstract a little bit more? That works out. But sometimes it's just clear that the talk just isn't going to work. Maybe the speaker isn't ready, the topic isn't right. Yes, focused is definitely the key. I mean, make sure you take an in-depth look at your subject. So I've been using Drupal caching as an example. If I got a talk that was just proposed, what about Drupal caching? That's an enormous subject. What are you talking about? Are you talking about it in one particular set of Drupals, some particular system, some experience you had with it, a case study. You know, tell me what about Drupal caching you want to talk about. Don't give me some big giant subject. But don't also give me 20 things about Drupal caching you want to talk about. That's also too much. Awesome. All right, we've got just about 5 minutes left for working or questions here before we go over to our informal working session. Oh, yeah, Fran asked, do you have to be a expert on a subject to give a talk about it? No, you absolutely do not. In fact, if I go back to yesterday's slides, we went through some myths about speaking. And you do not have to be an expert to talk about. Well, everyone has a different idea of what an expert means, and nobody knows everything. Everybody has something to learn. You might know more about your topic than your audience does, and you can find knowledge that your audience does not. And also, a way that some people decide their talk topics is something that they want to be an expert in, something that they want to learn. So, you know, if there's some specific thing that you are interested in and using that you want to learn more about, maybe you decide to write, you manage to come up with your abstract, and then, you know, if it gets accepted, that's what you do your research on. I have a tendency to sort of have a theme every year in my talks. Like one year I did women in tech and I gave different talks on the same subject. One year it was more about accessibility. And so I do sort of all of my research and things about that. And not that it's something I don't know about, but it's something that I dig way more into, and I do a lot of research and I read a lot of books. And then the talks are about for that year. So you absolutely do not have to be an expert. Oh, I should have checked what number slide I was on. Nope. These are for yesterday. Okay. So here is your homework for tonight, is to finish up your title, pitch, and outline Google Doc. I will also, I will have these slides in a few minutes after we are done here. I will post them in this chat and also in the DDI chat. I will also, we will have our working session right after this in the DDI booth. I will just take a second probably to go take a break and then come right back. Don't forget the session evaluation was shared at the top of the, that's pinned at the top here. And I also want to remind everybody about Contrib Day on Friday. Drupal diversity and inclusion will have a whole bunch of different issues you can work on. You can also join us and come work on your, if you want to come work on your talk, you can do whatever you would like. We would love to have you just come hang out, work on things. Just haven't done this virtual Contrib bit before, so I think it'll be pretty cool. And then a reminder that part 2 is tomorrow, or sorry, part 3, the last and final part, is tomorrow at the same time. And we can, if you want, you can share what you've written about your talks, and then we will go over writing your bio, tips for being a better speaker, and tips for making good slides. Do we have any final questions before we finish up here? Great, yeah, we have some good tips for being a better speaker. I think they're pretty helpful. Okay, well, if that's it, I am going to stop sharing, and I will export these slides for part 2 real fast and paste them in the chat, and then I will see you shortly over at the DDI booth to keep working. Thanks so much for coming, everybody.